This presentation is about common myths about dual language learners, taken from the book shown on this slide called Many Languages, One Classroom. The rate of growth of dual language learner children, or DLL, in the early care and education systems, as well as the public schools, continues to exceed projections, with 10 states experiencing more than 200% growth from 1990 to 2010. Fortunately, in the past 15 years, there have been advances in neuroscience and research on dual language development and research on multilingual development that can provide useful guidance on best practices for young dual language children. And you notice in the slide we go up to 2010, and at this point we don't have the numbers, at least not for this presentation, for where it is now. So I'm sure that it has gone up exponentially since then. The first myth is that learning two languages during the early childhood years will overwhelm, confuse, and/or delay acquisition of English. In fact, most young children throughout the world successfully learn more than one language from their earliest years. There is wide scientific consensus that bilingual infants develop two separate but connected linguistic systems during the first year of life. We now know that infants have the innate capacity to learn two languages from birth, and that if the early dual language exposure is sufficient in quantity and quality, young children can successfully become fully proficient in both languages. In fact, children who have balanced skills in two languages show greater advantages than children who have only learned to speak one language, particularly in the areas of cognitive development, executive function, and self-regulation. A second myth is that the language development of dual language learners looks the same as monolingual language development. Young bilingual children develop more widely dispersed and evenly distributed neural pathways across both brain hemispheres. The unique linguistic challenges faced by young dual language learner children leads to different sets of skills than those of children who have learned one language. Differences in acquiring language skills should not be interpreted as language delays due to learning in more than one language. While it may take a dual language learner longer to retrieve a word or to build their vocabulary, at the same time they're developing additional skills needed to process input in two different languages. A third myth is that total English immersion from pre-kindergarten through third grade is the best way for a young dual language learner to acquire English. For young children who are actively processing and have not mastered the fundamentals of their first language, completely shifting to a new, unfamiliar language during the early childhood years may negatively impact the ongoing development of their home language, as well as academic achievement in English in the long run. They tend to lose their ability to communicate in their first language, which causes a strain on their relationships with their family members, and it may have a negative impact on their academic skills in English in the long run. Intentional exposure to English during early childhood, combined with ongoing opportunities to learn important concepts in their home language, results in the highest achievement in both the home language and English by the end of third grade and beyond. They benefit cognitively and socially from learning more than one language. Encouraging DLL children's families to continue to talk with, read to, sing to, and use the home language in everyday activities will promote continued development of children's first language while they are also acquiring English in their pre-K through third settings. Another myth is that because schools don't have the capacity to provide instruction in all the languages represented by DLL children, programs should provide instruction in one common language, English. Early education programs throughout the country are reporting not only more DLL children, but also more different languages represented among their children and families. At the same time, less than 10% of our teachers are fluent in more than one language, and few teachers certified in early childhood education have any training in cultural and linguistic diversity. However, Even when teachers do not speak the child's home language, there are many specific teaching practices that will support continued development of the child's home language. Teachers and staff can support children's home language throughout the day in all kinds of learning situations. They can also train parents, community members, and volunteers to work with DLL children in their home language. Some of the strategies that can be used include meeting with parents to learn information about the child and the family, having visual displays in the classroom, books and materials that represent the cultures and languages, and vocabulary words introduced in children's home language. Early in the school year, teachers should meet with parents to learn critical information about the child and family. And as mentioned before, we can have visual displays that represent the languages, cultures, and family practices of the children enrolled in the classroom. And then as well as providing the books and materials that authentically represent the cultures and the languages of your students and families. Have students help you understand and read to them, or ask a volunteer or parent to help you with this. Have key vocabulary words introduced in the child's home language by a parent or community volunteer. And then you can also pre-read stories in the child's home language, use similar words in home language, use pictorial, real-world objects, and concrete experiences, and use visual cues and physical gestures and signals. Another myth is that Spanish-speaking Latinos show social as well as academic delays when entering kindergarten. Dual language learners consistently outperform monolingual children on tasks that require focused attention, inhibitory control, planning and working memory abilities, and mental flexibility. However, these advantages are found only when the child has had intensive experience and practice with more than one language. Myth number 6 is native English speakers may experience academic and language delays in dual language programs. All the students in a multicultural, multilingual environment experience the benefits and challenges associated with learning a second language during the early childhood years, as well as the richness of multicultural integration. In fact, the data from recent evaluations show that a balanced dual language approach is an effective model for all DLL students and native English speakers. All students seem to benefit cognitively, academically, and culturally when they develop proficiency in more than one language. Myth number 7. If the instruction in your program is delivered primarily in English, you do not need to worry about DLL children's progress in their home language. Both the child's home language and English should be assessed because assessing the child only in English will underestimate the child's knowledge and true abilities. Assessing a child who is a DLL only in English will rarely give an accurate or complete picture of what the child knows or can do. Assessment in both English and the home language will help determine what the child has learned and is capable of doing, as well as the child's level of language development. Programs need to choose assessment instruments, methods, and procedures that use the language or languages that most accurately reveal each child's knowledge, skills, and abilities. The assessment information gathered in the home language can be used to inform instructional practices and curriculum decisions to maximize the child's learning. Programs are to use culturally and linguistically appropriate assessments to capture what the children who are DLLs know and can do in all developmental areas. Some of the strategies that can be used is to support DLL students' home language and literacy development while also promoting their English language development. Focus on developing meaningful relationships with extended family members and a better understanding of family expectations for their children's development and learning. And third, family partnerships that are mutually respectful, engage in two-way communication, and incorporate important cultural and family background information offer promise for stronger homeschool connections. And then also design, implement, and evaluate instruction to help develop concepts in DLL students' home language and within the cultural context that are familiar and consistent with their home culture. Support bilingualism for all children whenever possible, and assess all DLL children's language and concept knowledge in both their home language and English.